thought. Nope, it's already live.
It's already live.
Dang it.
Fix your hair.
I already fixed my hat. Ready? Set.
Go!
Hey guys, it's Justin with Wild Edge Outdoors. This is Rocky. You've seen him a lot more than you've seen me. Right now we're just not exactly out in the hunt right now, but we wanted to do a quick recap of the pronghorn hunt, kind of the process that led us up to deciding that we wanted to do the hunt, putting in for the tag itself, the process getting us down there, the hunt, the scouting, the hunt, and just kind of everything in between. So yeah, why don't you start it off by kind of, I guess I can start it off.
Well, I was going to say, you basically started this whole thing. You asked me if there was some kind of hunt that I wanted to go on, and I remember saying that pronghorn would be kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
We've never tried that before, and we've only really seen them when we're driving out Montana. When there's pronghorn around, we've seen them, and that's as close we've ever gotten to hunting them.
Yeah, and they're just interesting looking things, and they're in areas that I've never lived or really hunted before. So when I asked you that, I think the basis for my decision making was kind of taking you into account, like, you know, because you have some of those injuries that doesn't really allow for a whole lot of stalking, and the little bit that I know of the archery aspect of pronghorn hunting is there's a lot of stalking, a lot of failed stalks if you're not just sitting in water. And neither one of us really wanted to sit in a ground blind and bake, at least this go around.
Wait and bake.
Yeah, no wait and bake. So yeah, and then that led us into just the tag, and here predominantly the tags are, you have to put in for a controlled hunt for rifle pronghorn, which we did, which was a decent unit as far as the statistics that I could figure out with the database that I used, and then based off of that, the animal expectation, hunter success, and then the ease of the terrain led us to the unit that we ended up putting in for.
Well, and I didn't even know he was doing all this. He just asked if I wanted to try pronghorn hunting, and I said, sure, sounds like fun. So I had it easy.
Yeah. And it was fun because, again, we've never done it before. I've put in for tags before, but I felt like I've done the most research with this because I wanted it to be something memorable, and not memorable in the sense that it was extremely difficult. So we put in for this tag and found out that we got it, and I let them know, and then we kind of planned on logistically and talked to a couple people that have more experience in pronghorn hunting than we do, and I guess...
Which is pretty much everyone that's hunted pronghorn.
Yeah, even once. And they suggested that we go down there and scout prior to the season and be ready basically with a couple different options, opening day or opening days, or the opening weekend, I guess, first couple days, because apparently, like most animals that are hunted, that opening weekend is pretty, I don't want to say easy, but there's a pretty steep learning curve for the animals, and yeah, so that's what we went with. We went down a day early, scouted for a full day, and then we went into the season itself. But drove to the unit, which was a full day's travel for us from where we live.
Yeah.
He came to my place and stayed the night.
Yeah, it was pretty close to the southern border of Idaho where we ended up.
Yeah, and then when we were packing up the truck and heading down there, we were talking about what we were going to do and the anticipation, and trying really hard to limit that anticipation, or like false expectation, or maybe unrealistic expectation.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really know what to expect because we had never even been down there really to that particular spot, and never hunted them before, so we didn't know what to expect. So we're kind of all over the map. So it's like, well, let's go down there, scout it out, see what we can see, and maybe we'll find some, maybe we won't.
Yeah.
Of course, I think everybody who knew where we were going said that, yeah, you'll find plenty, if I remember right.
Yeah, and then it helps that my good friend Adam, he and his dad were in the area and sent a couple pins on Onyx, which was essentially our starting point for just getting into the unit itself. And we'll go right here since that's the best information that we had, and went from there really.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first day we pulled in basically just as the sun was going down, so we couldn't really see anything. But the next day we woke up and drove around. Didn't take us too long to see the first bunch. And
yeah, that first night we basically pulled in and just found a spot where there wasn't anybody, just decent place to pitch the tent, and went to bed.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, when we woke up that next morning, we went to just look for the animals that we were going to pursue the following day when the season opened, and found some and marked them on Onyx and saved them for later. And it's a big unit, so we decided to just continue driving around and noticed that there was a trend. There's on the fringes of the unit, I think a lot of areas down there, there's a large agricultural aspect to it, and it seemed like any animals, including cattle, were fairly close to those agricultural areas.
Yeah, a severe lack of water down there. So if they aren't watering something, it's brown.
Yeah, dead. It was pretty obvious, because even in the areas that there weren't cattle, so, well, if there aren't any cattle.
Yeah, because there
There's
wasn't
gonna
any
be no
water,
water.
no green, anything. So.
And it seemed like they trucked in a lot, or went to a pretty extensive effort to have water sources available for the cattle, but
Yes.
for some reason the area that we drove through later in the day didn't have any water.
Yeah.
So we did end up going from our initial start point, I'd say about 20 miles south of there, in search of more animals, just for more options, contingency plans. And
Because we actually, about a mile from where we camped the first night, we ended up seeing 2 different herds.
yeah,
One on BLM and one on the ag land.
private land. And BLM is Bureau of Land Management, which essentially is just public land
Yeah.
here in Idaho. I'm not sure how it differs across the country in other states, because I know BLM
Yeah.
is pretty vast.
I had never heard of BLM until we moved out here from Minnesota. Minnesota was just state land or national forest.
Yeah.
That's all I knew about anyways.
Yeah, and there's definitely no national forest down there. There's no forest. It's all sage.
Yeah, right.
Sagebrush.
Well, it could be a sage forest. I don't know.
Yeah. So in some of the clips that you've already seen, it was a lot of us traveling around and glassing, and not a whole lot of really explanation, hence why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really know what to expect, or really, I don't know.
Yeah, we had no idea what to expect. So we saw those 2 herds right away, and we thought, well, okay, well, let's go see if we can find some more for more options, because we found those first thing in the morning, and it was like, we're not going to just camp here and just sit here and wait. So we had to do something the rest of the day, and I have to admit, it got really hot when we were scouting. It got,
Yeah.
it's at 88, 89, something like that day. And yeah, so we just kept driving, looking around, stopping, glassing, and finally, what'd you say, like 20 miles at another piece of private land, another farm, we found one more buck that was just camped out by himself. He was bedded down in the open, and watched him for a while. Had a coyote come out, and even though coyote came out, he stood up and started walking towards the coyote. Had another guy in a truck come by, and that guy was not going to come off of that private land. He liked that spot. He had a good setup, and he knew it.
Yeah, in that short amount of time that we were watching that single buck, he was bedded, he got up and fed, and drank, all within probably a 20-yard radius. So if I were him, I wouldn't have left either.
Yeah, there was no reason for him to.
Yeah, and it came it became very apparent quickly about kind of like when you're hunting larger tracts of forest, that edge habitat is usually where a lot of the activity happens, where you can find a lot of animals. And this was no different. It was just a strange edge habitat. It was on the outskirts of the agricultural areas, and there were huge circular swaths of fields because of the large
circular
sprinkler
irrigation.
Yeah, the large sprinkler systems that they utilize because it is a desert.
Yep.
So it was really interesting. Kind of the same. There's a lot of crossover with what I've learned, like growing up hunting whitetail back east in Minnesota, and then using some of that stuff out here in the western states too, and even out in the mountains chasing elk. It seems like the really, really dark timber stuff, when there isn't everything that they need, like water and shelter and food, it's closer to those edges. You know, it might not be like a clear cut, but it could be just where the vegetation changes, maybe from aspen to pine trees.
Yeah.
So it was all pretty transferable. And that's what became very apparent when we were down there scouting that first day. And for obvious reasons, it was very dry, and all that private ag field had water, food, and essentially shelter in the sense that it's wide open and
they can see a long way.
Yeah, apparently they have really good eyesight. Again, that's all information that we've gleaned from other resources, people, YouTube videos, some books here and there.
Yeah.
And just, it was definitely an adventure. It was fun.
So getting into the meat of things, we decided that since we had seen those two herds, we thought we'd go back and take a look and see if they were still there, because it was getting towards the end of the day. And so we traveled back to where we saw them, and sure enough, that one herd on the ag field on private land was still there. There were 14 of them, and all 14 were still there, counted them. And so we ended up thinking, well, let's just pitch our tent over not too far from there, and then we'll go in and see if there's a way to get close to them and maybe sit on them in the morning, and if they come off of private land, then we can take a shot at them. So we pitched our tent and ended up going in there, taking a look at them, watching them for a while, figured out a good vantage point for the morning. Then we decided the easiest thing would be to go get our tent, bring it back to closer to where we were going to go in and hunt these guys. So we go back, and
essentially, so we didn't have to start up a motor in the morning.
Right.
Just going to make everything so much easier and quieter.
Because we used the four-wheeler to get over to that area. So anyways, we go back and start breaking down camp, packing everything up, and we just got everything packed up. Justin here, he ever looking for animals, he takes his binoculars out and looks out into the other field where we had seen the herd before, the ones that went over a rise. There they are.
Was it a field or like the draw you're talking about?
Well, yeah, in the draw.
It wasn't an agricultural field. It was a sage draw with some green stuff in the bottom of it. It just looked like it would hold animals.
Yeah. To me, anything without trees is a field. There's no trees. Anyways, yeah, there's another herd out there. And so we decide these guys are already on public land.
Yep.
We can try hunting them first thing. We don't have to sit there and wait for them to come off the private land. So
no wait and bake theory.
No wait and bake.
Referring to the hot sun.
Yeah, because it was supposed to get about 90 that day.
Yeah.
So we'd take everything out and repitch our camp. And watched them until the sun went down, and they just bedded down right there in that draw.
As we were kind of ending the day and just planning for the next morning's hunt, the opening day, looking at the Onyx map that I had downloaded on my phone, and just looking around at the terrain, kind of figuring out our best approach for the morning stalk and setup and shooting one of the bucks, or the buck that we saw.
Yeah, we only saw one for sure.
Yeah, it was a on the satellite imagery, it looked like a white strip but then I later found out that it was actually a wash and there was a lot of sand in the area, and I marked the head of that, and using one of the line tools, the tool in the app itself, from where they were bedded, the pronghorn were bedded, to where I think we were going to be able to get to, was roughly 350 yards. And then using that line tool, I was able to get a rough estimate of the distance of where I thought we were going to be able to see them, and they were probably going to start being able to see us, because that wash, we could walk upright for several hundred yards just getting to within a decent rifle range. And we did that. We went to that waypoint that I marked at the head of that wash the previous night in the dark, and started walking down it. And that was another nice thing. It was super quiet because it was sand, essentially. And every once in a while, as we were getting closer and the sun was starting to get up, I would glass. I'd get up to the crest of the wash and peek up over the sagebrush. The first time I did it, I thought they were bedded still in the exact same place that we left them.
But it was so dark, it was hard to
it wasn't
tell for sure.
I wouldn't have bet anything on it.
I looked, I couldn't tell at all.
But I was confident I mean, it definitely grew the anticipation.
Yeah.
It was right on that border of for sure and I'm pretty sure. So, we got a little closer, I'd say another 100 yards or so, and a little bit brighter, a little bit closer, glassed again, and it was definitely confirmed.
Yeah, they were there.
At that point, 2 of them had gotten up from the main group, and they were feeding up on this little ridge. It had a really defined game trail that you can, I'm not sure if you can see it in the satellite image, but it was a nice reference point as we were traveling and keeping our heads down and poking back up. And then I glassed those 2 up on the hillside, and then glassed back in the draw, and most of the herd was still just bedded as the sun was coming up. And
one of those 2 was the buck that you were looking at.
And that was one of my expectations of, I didn't really have a size, because apparently these things are really hard to field judge based off of the people that we talked to, again, the YouTube videos that we watched. And I really just came down to, if I initially see a buck and it tickled my fancy, I was going to be good with it. And that's what this buck did. It was like, you could tell, that was one of the things that I learned, was if the base of the horn is at least as wide as its eye, it's pretty decent mass. And it was definitely that. It tickled my fancy, and it was instantaneous that I knew I would want to take a shot at this thing. So
I had much lower standards.
Yeah.
I wanted meat. If I'd take a doe, I didn't care. But anyways.
I was going to try to talk him out of shooting a doe the first day if it came down to it. But so we continued our stalk into position, and as I'm looking forward, I started ranging, and we've got scopes that have the ability to adjust the turrets and get our dope dialed in. So that's what I was preparing to do.
Okay.
Well, as you can see, the environment has changed slightly.
Yeah.
There was a nice storm that came through, which we
didn't anticipate.
Well, and we definitely need the rain, so we're not going to complain about it. But where did we leave off? Oh, we were getting to that point where I was starting to get range on the animals, because I needed it to dial my scope to the appropriate range and on the turret, so I can just hold on, point of aim, point of impact. And I got set up and I felt great, and even in the video it looks great. I mean, it took a few minutes to get to that point, because I was using part of the wash to get set up and stable and feeling good about it, and they were just up feeding, so I didn't have to worry about it too much that way.
And I was able to use the camera to film the buck that he was pointing at, aiming at.
Yeah. And I got set up and felt comfortable. Of course, I was super excited. You know, it's a pronghorn. I've never hunted this, and we were glassing quite a few, but I'm sure a lot of you know it's just different when you're either at full draw looking through your peep or looking at an animal through your scope. And man, it looked awesome looking through the scope and seeing that buck, and just all the planning and the travel that went into the trip, and it just came out as soon as, you know, it worked out as well as we had hoped up until that point. And as I could hear my dad, or Rocky, you know, getting all set and ready with the cameras, I wanted to make sure, so I asked him, and I felt confident, I felt steady. I was trying to calm myself down as much as I could. I didn't feel too amped up, and clicked the safety off, and I took the shot as the buck turned broadside, and I missed. I was really surprised, honestly. I've been doing a lot of shooting with several different rifles, and I know how important mechanics are. I know it wasn't the best execution of a shot, but it didn't seem like it was that bad.
And you were at, how far away was the shot at that point?
At that point, it was 330.
Which you felt really confident at. You've practiced quite a bit at much longer ranges.
Yeah, I've practiced and routinely make hits out to more than double that range on smaller steel targets. And I didn't really think anything of it, and I put another round in the chamber, and
I couldn't really see very well what was going on. I could see that little dust cloud, but I didn't know if it was a pass-through, because I'm looking through the little screen on the camera, and I can't see real good detail on that. It's not that high quality of a camera, apparently.
Yeah.
So
and I got resituated, and even after that first shot, because it was opening morning, within the first 10-15 minutes of shooting time, they, after that shot, had no idea what was going on, so most of them actually just went right back to feeding and didn't even move maybe 50 yards from where they all were when I shot.
Yeah, and that buck didn't run. He just kind of jerked around a little bit and then just started walking and started feeding again.
Yep. And I rearranged him, and even in the video you can see that I'm taking my time, and as he's moving, because they're kind of nervous. Obviously, if you hear a gunshot and the bullet close enough to where you can hear that thing going by, and they're wild animals, they're not completely stupid. Even for
on opening day.
Morning, yeah. So I was getting everything situated, and I ranged him probably more than what I needed to, and I even have a dope card taped to the side of my stock, but because I felt like something was off, I wasn't looking at that. So in the video you saw me using my phone more than I wanted to, because I just wanted to make sure I was using the correct data for my scope.
Yeah.
And the load that I had, which, I've confirmed it, and like I said, I shot quite a bit. So we stopped again, and I dialed my turret just a little bit, because he was actually a little closer. The draw was the furthest point, and the direction that the animals were traveling were on the far hillside, which had a couple of little finger draws in it with some green stuff, and the whole herd just generally went from our left to right, feeding slowly. And he stopped again, and I had adjusted my scope and fired again and shot over his back. And at that, I think in the video you can hear me ask Rocky if he can see or where my shot was impacting, and because he was doing what he was supposed to, he couldn't quite see because he was focused on the camera. So
yeah, and I just couldn't see detail enough in that screen, so I could just see a puff of dust out there, but I couldn't tell exactly where it was.
And we talked about whether or not we were gonna talk about me missing twice, and I just felt like I feel like I'm a pretty genuine person, and
keep it real.
People miss, and I did twice. And at that point, I was kind of dumbfounded, and like kind of in my head, just kind of scatterbrained, and like, what the heck are we gonna do? And they still, they were still out there, and most of them had gone back to feeding. I remember seeing a couple of the does actually squatting down to pee right after that second shot.
Yeah,
I was like, that just seems weird for an animal that's been around the vicinity of gunfire to just, if they're really going crazy, to
And even the buck, you can see in the video that he took off running in a circle, and then wasn't sure if he got hit because all of a sudden he started hanging his head down, and I thought, well, maybe he's not feeling too well.
Mm-hmm.
But then it looked like he was just feeding.
Yeah. So, and then you can see we take off after, we decide to, I'm kind of running through the things that I absolutely needed to make another, shot, basically. So I grabbed my phone for the ballistic data app, my rangefinder, and binoculars, I think.
And we had already dropped our packs
Yeah.
before this, just to be as light as we could be and
quiet.
And quiet, so we could. So we already left a bunch of stuff back before the first two shots.
Yeah, so we started off after them. It was, for those of you that used to play football or maybe even still do, it kind of, the angle of pursuit popped into my head. So they were traveling from left to right, and I kind of pick out a couple areas that I kind of could foresee us getting a shot again. So we just took off at an angle, bent over at the waist, and just slowly picked our way through the sagebrush and found another spot to set up. And even that was a little bit tricky because now that sense of urgency, and I had just blown 2 shots, and we don't want to miss this opportunity, or I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So in my head, I was kind of freaking out a little bit, and I was just trying to get comfortable for a shot. And the bipod that I had on there was a little bit longer than the one that I normally use, because I kind of figured I would need it with the sagebrush being as tall as it was, and it became a little bit problematic with just an awkward height. So I ended up dropping the bipod legs and having a very high posture, resting very high on my elbows, and they were still just feeding from left to right. And I ranged the herd, the majority of the herd, at 275, 276, adjusted my scope accordingly, and basically just waited for that buck to feed and walk into my window again.
And at this point, I wanted to see if I could tell where he was hitting, because I didn't know if he was gonna, he sounded like he needed some feedback, and I couldn't give him any with the camera. So I thought, well, it was more important to actually get a good shot than to film it. So I put down the main camera and started watching with the binoculars. I did still have the little GoPro on my head on, so there's something. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah. And got all set up, and here he came, and I felt very, very calm. And because of those 2 shots, I've noticed if I'm a little excited on the first shot and I need a follow-up shot, I've done that on a cow elk before. The first shot will hit, but then the second shot, just to put her down. I just remember always being much more calm on those second shots. Well, it took 3 this time, so I went back to the scope, and I'm in the rifle, and I can see the buck coming down in front of me, and he's in my scope, and he stops, and I squeeze the trigger, and it goes click, because that second shot I didn't work the action because I missed. Again, I was feeling a little dumbfounded. So I got another round in the chamber, and he didn't go anywhere, so I just acquired him in the scope again, and you can hear it in the video. I take one more deep breath to relax myself before this third shot, and as the shot broke, my crosshairs were exactly where I wanted it, and by the time I got back onto the buck, he was just about done moving from just dropping in his tracks.
Yeah, I was watching with the binoculars, and it was like, at this time, it was like you hear the gun go off, and legs just fall up from underneath the pronghorn. He's down. Doesn't even kick. He's just boom. That was it.
Yeah, and you can hear the bullet impact too. I remember hearing it when we were hunting, and I'm pretty sure you can hear it in the video too. I'll have to
We'll see.
Look again, but
you never know until you play it back.
It's either way, it was a huge sense of accomplishment and relief. And it's not the hardest hunt, but it was something new, and I had missed twice, and it was nice that I was able to recover. And
yeah,
a well executed third shot.
Well, and that's a
dropped him
big
in his
thing.
tracks.
Yeah, you lose a little confidence, but you could have just quit and go, well, I'm just not shooting well and just not shot again.
Yeah.
But kept on working and not just taking a random shot, but just going back to all the things you've learned and trying again, and this time being successful.
Yeah. After that, excited, high fives, jubilation. Now we decided we should probably go get the equipment that we had dropped along the way.
Yep, so we could go out there and start processing it.
Yeah, so we got back to our packs and our...
Yeah, we left our packs.
And I left my bino case. Basically just everything from that location of where we first dropped the packs to where I fired twice initially.
Yeah.
And then as we grabbed that stuff and then decided to make a loop around using the wash and just walking in that because it was easier.
It was just easier to walk.
As we were walking, I caught an object out of the corner of my eye.
And at this point, the sun is actually breaking the horizon, so it's really lighting up the hillside.
And specifically another pronghorn because they're white, and the sun just illuminated the white incredibly. And looked, and I said, "Hey, Pop, there's another pronghorn." And I looked at it with my binoculars, and it was another buck. So we got him all situated, and
they were off to the left. The ones that we were shooting at were over to our right. This one was over to the left, like they were. And then you saw another couple of them behind him, and it looked like they were starting to feed in the same direction.
Yeah.
From left to right. So I think we left everything right there, and I'd left the main camera and your rifle back where Justin had actually shot his pronghorn, and so we've got stuff kind of scattered all over the place at this point. But I still had my rifle with me, and I had the GoPro on my head, and we both had our phones, and so we went over to the left and got in position to where that one was going to feed into where we thought it would. And I've got issues with my neck. I can't shoot out of the prone position, so I've got a longer bipod. So I got it all extended as far as I could, got in a place where I could shoot over the sagebrush. Justin was kind of looking. Were you looking with your binoculars or just with your naked eye?
Both.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you had left your binoculars somewhere too.
No, I put those back on.
So anyways, he's directing me of where it's going to come out, and he's telling me that there's a little bush that he's going to come out by that. So I got all set up so I could see that bush in my scope and everything. And sure enough, that pronghorn came out just a little bit above that bush. And man, it just felt good. And I got a new gun, a new scope, and just leaned into that bipod, and it felt just really nice and steady. And this one was, you ranged it at what, 150 yards?
Initially it was 178, so we adjusted your scope there. And I think it was facing us at that point, and you said it felt so comfortable you could shoot him right in the chest.
Yeah.
I said, why don't we let's wait until he turns broadside. And as he did so, he continued to get closer to us, and the final distance that we adjusted for was 150, and did a little coyote bark basically and got him to stop, and it was pretty much a done deal right there.
Yeah, it just was able to just squeeze that shot off, and mine did the exact same thing that Justin's did. When that bullet hit, feet just went out from under him, and he just dropped, and I think I saw his hind leg kick once or twice, and that was it. He was done.
Yeah.
And so you can see in the video, I just couldn't believe that this happened. I mean, we both basically filled out on a buck in the first hour. I mean, it was like before 8 o'clock by the time all this was done.
Yeah. Yeah, and is one of the things that we've been doing with my shooting and the research is I've gotten a lot of help from a friend of mine, Matt, who's helped me with hand loads for these rifles, and they're both chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. We use the 143 grain ELDX, a Hornady bullet that has worked great. I think now that exact load and bullet has killed 3 animals. Your bear,
Mm-hmm.
and those 2 pronghorn, and the bullets have performed phenomenally, and I'm super happy with it.
Yeah, I am. I'm not big on ballistics and all that kind of stuff. I'm, I guess, more into the details of fishing, but Justin here has been learning a lot and then teaching me, so I don't know, it's been a good team. We've been able to connect on a few different things now.
Yeah, it's been great. And then, of course, after both the bucks were down, one of the things that, again, we learned through the people that we were talking to and YouTube channels, and I sound like a broken record, but we needed to get the meat taken care of quickly, and that's a huge part of pronghorn tasting good.
Yeah.
And having good table fare for those animals. So since
And
we had 2 animals down,
yeah, and that's the most important thing when we're out there is we're shooting for meat. We're getting meat for our families, and the horns are a plus, but
yeah, it's
meat
a
is the most
fun bonus.
important part. Yeah.
Yeah, we differ slightly on that. For me, it's obviously the meat and what you're saying for the family, but those whatever whatever the mount may be, whether it's a shoulder mount, European skull, or
Yeah.
horns or antlers, depending on the species you're chasing, or a skull, for a bear or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of those memories for me tie into that. So
That's true. Yeah.
But we did have 2 animals down, so we got working on Pop's animal pretty quick. And then as he was doing his thing, I made sure he was going to be good to take care of it, the rest of it, on his own, and went and grabbed mine because we had moved mine down to the shade at that point too. So I went and took care of mine, and we quartered them up using the gutless method.
Yep.
Carried all the meat back to camp first, got it on ice in a big old cooler, and
Yep.
went back for the gear and the heads, which is where we left them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and actually the cooler is it's actually Cabela's brand cooler, but it looks like a.
What are you saying? It's like a version of Cabela's version of a Yeti?
Yeah, that's what I was told, and actually I got this from a friend of mine, David Miller, and thanks, David. It saved us. I mean, both pronghorn fit inside there,
Yeah.
and kept them nice and cold.
Yep.
I mean, it's kept ice for a good long time in that really high heat.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, so we went back and got the heads, got our rifles, and whatever else we had left there.
Yeah. Our garage sale.
Yeah, we had stuff left all over. For a while, we couldn't even find our stuff because you think it's right, you're gonna find it, and all of a sudden it's like, sages. It all looks the same. So we wandered around for a while to get some of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that's pretty much our hunt in a nutshell. We feel very blessed to be able to do this, be successful, do this together as a father and son team.
Yeah.
And both getting our first pronghorn together. It's been a great memory. Feel very, very blessed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot of thanks for sure. My wife Jess for holding down the fort while I was gone. And I kind of shout out to Adam and Matt and Frank too, with the whole process of preparing and getting us, where, it's life.
Yeah.
Is one of those things. It's all about relationships, and
Yep.
you try to do it on your own.
Thanks again to David for the cooler.
Yeah, you try to do it on your own. It's just hard.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. So
Yeah.
relationships and asking for help and accepting help when it comes, and that's exactly what this was. Like a lot of people, it wasn't just us.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you that we're just expert hunters and we just know how to do everything, but that's so far from the truth.
Yeah.
We just do what we can and get a lot of help from friends and family, and and thanks to Jess for also doing a lot of cooking and grocery shopping for us too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we did not go hungry.
Yeah, and thank you guys for watching the video and hanging out with us for this period of time.
Yep. If you enjoyed this video at all, feel free to subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we put out more content.
Yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
Yep. Thanks for watching.